Happy Fursuit Friday, everyone. Another time for a world in review. So Anthrocon released their numbers, and I have to make a redaction because of those numbers. I projected, and I've been projecting for about a year now, saying that if growth rates continue at the particular rate, that in 2 years, Anthrocon would be overtaken by Midwest Fur Fest. I can tell you that after the numbers were released for this weekend, that's changed. At least at this current particular time. So my projection for this year's Anthrocon was at 6,800 attendees, after last year's 6,300 and change. So I had projected around a 450 growth. So the number was not 6,800. Ironically, when I put that projection up on my article but it was about Biggest Little FurCon and its growth, Green Reaper said, "That's a bit optimistic, don't you think?" And I was like, "That's just based on projections. That's just based on like the average growth in attendance over the years and just putting those numbers down. So if anything, it's middling. Like it's not like saying that there's something going to drag it down or there's something that's going to pull it up." Well, the good news for the fandom is that there's something pulling it up. And so in this case, we have this year's Anthrocon numbers. So let me get my envelope. I don't have an envelope. No fanciness. No. I'm already kind of milking it, aren't I? Yeah, you want to know what that number is, don't you? You probably already know what that number is. So the number is 7,310. 7,310. That's double my optimistic projections, Green Reaper. So, if anything, my projections were pessimistic. So the projection got doubled on. So there was a growth of about 900. There's a growth of 931 attendees from last year, as opposed to around the 400 which I had projected. Congratulations, first off, to Anthrocon. Why did it grow so much? I think that I really think, and this is kind of a theory though, that a lot of people who are curious are coming in now. Like like last year, what happened was, and I was part of it. I'll kind of show you a video. I was in the Anthrocon parade last year, and basically, it was the first year that they went out into the city to kind of do it. Now, the convention center's in downtown, and people gathered up and watched it. So I think that a lot of people who are curious about the convention and were curious about it from last year. I heard last year there was a lot of people who were coming in, buying one-day tickets and stuff like that after, the whole parade happened. Because, they're like, oh man, this seems kind of cool and curious. I'm curious. So I think that's happening. And I think that decision to kind of involve the city with the convention was a strong idea. And I don't think any other convention has done this so far. And that being said, that's going to make Anthrocon a lot stronger, I think, is tying the actual city with. I can't, here's the thing, sociologically, he's basically tying Anthrocon with Pittsburgh, making it kind of a symbiotic relationship, as opposed to sort of a viral relationship, which most conventions kind of do. Whether they be bigger ones or smaller ones. They're basically like, we're using your city for our party. Basically, that's kind of the whole attitude that conventions usually take. And Anthrocon's a little different in that they're like, no, we're part of this city now. We want to make sure that we're symbiotic with this particular city. And I think that people of Pittsburgh, even if they're not furry, might buy a ticket. So you kind of have that whole thing. And whether or not this was just purely... And there's other issues too, I think that there's growth in furry conventions across the country, and I think that is also because furries are growing, and they're a young, we are young, but we're getting to the point where we're more financially independent. Like a lot of the younger furries are becoming more financially independent, so they can go to these places. They can go to conventions that they couldn't go to before. So you're going to see growth probably that's more than the projected across the board. That being said, I can't say for sure. I cannot, like I said, 2 years was what Anthrocon had left at the current projection. As of right now, if I take the projections I have for Midwest Fur Fest and compare it to the projections of what actually happened this year at Anthrocon, then I cannot say that Anthrocon can be overtaken, because currently the delta, which is the change, in attendance was 900 and something this year. I have the projections of Midwest Fur Fest at around 600. So that's my projection. Now, of course, my projection was very short on Anthrocon, so it very may be that my projections for Midwest Fur Fest are also shy. Depending on how shy is depending on whether or not my prediction still holds true. But it makes it a lot harder for MFF to overtake Anthrocon. Like, a lot harder. Because they're not only going to have to beat my projection of 600, they're going to have to beat 900. Because if they make 900, that means they're running parallel with Anthrocon, which means they won't ever overtake them. So what ends up happening is anyone's guess. But I can say that decisions, despite what some people might think about the leadership at Anthrocon, they've continued successful growth. The decisions by the board and the decisions by the people in charge have led to successful growth, and they continue to be successful. Even if they made some decisions that have been controversial within the fandom. So, that being said, it's a good news for the fandom, as growth is always a good thing. But, you know, I'm definitely thinking that it makes it harder to say that one political ideology within the fandom is ever going to win. Because guess what? It looks like we're going to have to still keep with the prudes and the crudes and just kind of have this whole, like, things. Like, because a lot of people who think that Anthrocon is kind of a prudish con, and heck, it's working. So, you know, there's going to be other cons where, you know, those kind of things work as well. Obviously, the thing is, like, you have to take a balance with politics. It's politics, man. It's a very tough thing. You have to balance the strengths versus the weaknesses, and you know, how much checks and how much balances do you put over attendees, or you know what you allow in your dealer's den. You know, those are interesting questions. And for Anthrocon, it seems that they are growing despite the controversial decisions that they've made. So it's hard to argue. It's hard to argue against that kind of a thing. Now, one interesting thing is that, as I said earlier, a lot of people who aren't furries might be buying tickets to go in and be curious. At that point, it's like maybe what will end up happening, and I don't think it's going to happen because a lot of furries are going to want to go to Anthrocon, right? And a lot of people who want to see furries are going to want to go to Anthrocon because it's their biggest one, right? But then the question comes, like, when does the scales tip where more people are curious about what furries are who are there than actual furries themselves? And if that scale ever gets tipped to the point where people who are there just to see the furries go, there's not as many furries here as there used to be. Now, I don't think that's going to happen at all. It's just an interesting thought of, you know, things that, you know, it's interesting little hypotheses and stuff like that of things of way things can grow and way things can change. Because, you know, the symbiotic relationship right now, and I think it's purely symbiotic, which is great. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. And I hope that, you know, I hope that more conventions can do that. A lot of conventions are going to have a hard time doing that because right now the other two big two, one is MFF, the other one's Biggest Little Fur Con. I don't know much about the other ones because I haven't really done as much research. But as far as that goes, like, MFF is kind of out in the suburb area. It's kind of in a commercial suburban area next to the airport, and people normally don't go out that way on their own fruition. Like, it's not like downtown Pittsburgh where people are like are there anyway. They're there because it's downtown, man. That's where all the action is. MFF is not in the downtown area. It's about 45 minutes away by subway. So it's not really integrated into Chicago. It's kind of a little bit on the side. And I think the same thing with Reno. Biggest Little Furcon, it takes over the Grand Resort Hotel, sure. But the Grand Resort Hotel is kind of a little bit away from Reno, like downtown Reno and stuff like that. So there's not really much of an integration with it. And the strengths of a tourist trap destination such as Reno or Nevada doesn't kind of lead to the strength that Anthrocon could have by subjecting those kind of things, because you have the issue where tourist traps usually don't the tourists usually don't intermingle with the city. There's kind of an exploitative feel to it. And because I've talked with people who have lived in Las Vegas, and the tourists get away with stuff, okay? The tourists can get away with some stuff that normal people who live in the city don't get. And the tourists are treated better because they're the ones who are providing the revenue. They're the ones that are providing the taxes. They're the ones that are providing for the city more than the people who are there. So for a tourist destination trap, it gets to the interesting thing where the civilians who live there feel like second-class citizens compared to those who are just visiting. The guests are treated better than those that live there, is what I'm saying. So the whole, oh, hey, we're guests and we're going to come parading around in your thing, it seems... It'll be harder to create that sort of symbiosis in that regard. Now, growth can happen regardless of symbiosis. I'm pretty sure if you go to a G3 or E3, my gaming cred just got lost. If you go to an E3 or if you go to some place like that, they're probably not connected with the city all that much. They're just like most conventions, using as their party stand. So, it's interesting that Anthrocon goes that way. And we're going to see in the future where things go. I can make weird little projections and stuff like that, but the numbers at the end of the day are the things you have to follow. And based on those numbers, I have to redact my prediction of the 2 years. At this point, it's infinite years. I can't make any projections on when Anthrocon will be overtaken, if so, and I can't wait to see what the MFF numbers will be and see if that changes my projections at all. But currently, AC is number one, and AC is going to remain number one for an indefinite future. So, congratulations to the board and staff. Didn't hear too many negative things, other than because of the unprecedented growth. Maybe there was a guy that was standing in line for about 6 hours ish. There was a statement where one guy was waiting 6 hours to get a con badge. They were in line to get a con badge for 6 hours, literally 6 hours. And there seemed to be a witness that backs that up. Now that wouldn't surprise me, seeing as there was a growth of about 1,000, double the growth rate that is projected. That something like that could happen. So at this point, despite the experience that the people have on staff there, they're probably going to want to start talking to the bigger fish. And they probably already do. I don't know. They might need to start thinking about, if they don't already, talking to people like Dragon Con, E3, Comic Con, bigger conventions, and figure out how they manage to get people's badges to them very quickly. Because if the growth continues in this way, we need to start rethinking the way we do things. The whole doing the A through S and the whole, putting the pre-register line here and the other register line over here ain't going to cut it no more. And, it might not cut it because it might make things a little too wonky. So I think that despite that one complaint, I think that I didn't hear too many more, and that's good. But, you know, the future will decide, and people will decide, and I think Anthrocon is not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm sorry, Kagi. I know you wanted to retire at some point, but you seem to be still doing it. You still seem to be doing what you do. So you still for the foreseeable future, you're still going to be, you know, hammering it out. So keep up the good work. All right? And same with the volunteers and the staff. Because despite that one complaint, I think that things got, eventually when people thought it was like, oh, well, there's a problem here, I think that they focused on it and they got it done. So hopefully that is the case. And hopefully in the future we can, you know, they'll figure that out and get all those little kinks out. But anyways, thanks very much for watching. See you later.